Hello, everyone. Welcome, one and all. This is the Do Dissidents podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, joined for a third time by our recurring guest, my friend of 17 years, Justin Van Voorhis.
How you doing? I was trying to just think of something immediately Bob Dylan-y to say, but at the last second I couldn't think of anything. But hello.
All right, well, hello will have to do. So, there is a new Bob Dylan album released today. It's called Rough and Rowdy Ways. We're both big Dylan fans, and we've thought, hey, as long as I got a podcast called Do Dissidents, right? How could you ignore the release of a new Bob Dylan album, right? So, we're going to count down our top 10 Dylan songs. Bit of a lighter show today, bit of a departure from the news. Everybody could use a break every once in a while. But there actually is another reason, Justin, why we are having you on the show today. I'm very excited to announce that Justin and I will be doing a little spin-off podcast of our own, a little sister podcast to the Do Dissidents podcast called the Dissident Film Club. And that'll be a podcast that deals with movies, political revolutionary cinema, both past and present. And Russell will be joining us on quite a few of those episodes as well. But that'll be really fun. We thought as long as we're going to be recommending movies at the end of every episode anyway, we might as well just do another project. Since our sectors of the economy still have not reopened, we still have time to do something like that. So that'll be a fun little project. That episode, the first episode of that, is up right now. It should be on all of the podcast players right now. Please find and please subscribe to that if you want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the kinds of movies that we sometimes bring up from time to time on these shows. So anyway, that's kind of exciting. But for today, like I said, we are going to be counting down the top 10 Dylan songs in our personal opinion. Of course, we each came up with a list of 10 tunes, and we are going to start that right about now. We've never done a music show before. We've done some movie-themed shows, but we have never done a music show. So I hope this is in your wheelhouse, and if it's not, hey, you'll learn something at least.
And why watch TV with apocalyptic news when you could listen to a podcast talking about apocalyptic music?
Yeah, that's true. There is a lot of apocalyptic imagery in a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of his songs.
several of the
Um,
songs on my list, and probably on
okay.
yours as well.
Yeah, looking at it, yeah. If not necessarily apocalyptic, definitely I put a lot of dissident songs on there for
Oh
sure.
yeah,
A
oh
lot of the
yeah.
protest stuff. And looking at it, yeah. I could definitely see that. Anyway, you're the guest. Why don't you kick this off?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know, how did you get into Dylan?
I mean, my dad was a big fan. So my dad had Blood on the Tracks on vinyl. I think that they would play quite a bit just when I was growing up. They also were big into the Oh Mercy album because that came out when I was
Yeah,
about three.
yeah, it's a
And that
great
was like
album.
the first album that came out in a while that was any good of his. And
Yeah.
I actually think Oh Mercy, while it's a good album, I think it's a little bit overrated in terms of the whole Dylan oeuvre because of when it came out. Like people were just so excited that there was a good one finally came out that they made like it was a masterpiece. When I don't think it's quite on that level, but that album was actually produced by the great Daniel Lanois, who is a great
Yeah.
songwriter in his own right and has some great albums out. And then he went on to produce. Well, no, he produced Time Out of Mind, and
And Love
then
and Theft.
Dylan. I thought Dylan self-produced
Oh,
Love and
maybe he
Theft
did. It was definitely, well, he
as
definitely did
Jack
Time Out of Mind, yeah.
Frost. That's
That's
his
right,
sort of
Jack Frost,
producer
yeah.
alter ego. So anyway, I kind of grew up with that music, but then what got me back into him is that Modern Times, which is a great album, one of his later albums, obviously, that came out in 2006 when I was in college, and when you're in college, if a new Dylan album comes out, like people would still listen. Like that was still thought of as like cool to listen to the new Bob Dylan album, even though we were in college and it was 40 years after he burst onto the scene. And so I like that album quite a bit. And then I just started like digging through some of my parents' old CDs because they bought pretty much everything that he came out with. And so I started listening to some of the other later stuff, and then early mid 20s, you just start really kind of digging into it, and it's really fun. I went through a similar phase with Jethro Tull, one of my other favorite bands, where they just have such a wealth of material. It's a lot of fun when you're young and you get into like either a classic rock band or just an artist like Dylan or Tull that just has so much out, and you could just have a lot of fun exploring that catalog as I did. And I
I
got
know
to know
because
pretty
by
much
the
all his
time, yeah,
stuff pretty well.
because by the time that you figure it out, there's like 30 or 40 years of material,
Right. It's
and
not like
yeah,
exactly.
and especially like when you are in your 20s, and that's really the period of your kind of you're expanding your horizons in terms of what you like in the world when it comes to art, whether it be film or music or stuff like that. My dad was always into music. He always had a lot of records. He was a Dylan fan. He had some on CD that I could listen to. But I really got into it because I heard a few songs that I really liked. And before that, my musical tastes were very, very limited. I think it was just like film scores, Disney and Sinatra. I think was probably through middle school, but then really into and when I got into college, you had all the CDs. You had every single one of his albums, and so I would borrow those albums and copy them to my iTunes or whatever I had and listen to them on my iPod there. And that was like the first time when you find somebody who like really speaks to you. I didn't understand a lot of stuff that he was singing about, but it doesn't really matter. It's just what sounds good to you. And I really took to him. And that was the first concert that I saw. We saw it with Tom Camacho. We went to Oh yeah, that was
Oh
funny.
yeah,
So
that
I
was
didn't I,
funny.
I didn't understand where Rochester was. I knew it was in New York. I didn't know it was that far.
Yeah, so
And
Justin just
yeah.
bought tickets to a show without even consulting me about it,
No,
I
no,
don't
no, no,
think.
no, no. I told everybody where it was, and
You said it was Rochester?
I of course I said it was Rochester, and no one seemed to have a problem with that until we were gonna go. And once we realized we were like driving there and driving back, we were like, we could have actually gone to Virginia to see the
No,
concert
Rochester is
because it's like the
basically
same.
Cleveland.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's closer to Cleveland than it
right.
is to New York City.
Yeah,
And so yeah, so you bought tickets thinking that because it was in New York,
I didn't think it was that
that it was safe
far.
to go.
And anyway, but everybody agreed to it. But then, like on the way, they're like, "Yeah, why are we going this far for this?" And we were with our friend Tom Camacho, and we get there, and it's in the field house of that university there, and it was a great show. They had a great opening act, and then
Yeah,
Elvis Costello
they had
did
Elvis
an
Costello and
acoustic
Amos Lee,
set.
right?
Yeah, but then and Elvis Costello was great, and then Dylan came out, and Dylan, what we would come to know is that Dylan is kind of horrible in concert. He is really, really bad in concert. And
Well, that was
Camacho,
my second time seeing him. That wasn't my
right,
first. My
right,
second time was much more convenient. He played on my college
college
campus.
campus,
I
yeah,
could just walk there from the dorm as
and
opposed to
like
driving 6 hours each
right.
way.
And like ten minutes into the Dylan portion of the show, Camacho wanted to leave because it was like, this is horrible. And like, did not travel 6 hours to.
Yeah, he wanted to leave at like the second song. It was "It Ain't Me, Babe,"
Right.
and he just turns to us and starts laughing hysterically and saying, "Should we just leave?"
Hey, me,
uh,
babe. Nah, nah.
it's actually quite it is a peculiar experience, and the thing is he plays live all the time now. I mean, obviously
Yeah,
not now because of the pandemic, but he's still on his what he calls a never-ending tour where he
yeah,
plays like 60, 70 dates a year, I think,
yeah.
and none of
And they
them are
all
really any
suck.
good. Yeah. Anyway, shall we get
We'll
started?
we'll get started. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
My number 10 is a song called "Every Grain of Sand," which is off of the "Shot of Love" album, which is a kind of a terrible album. There's only like maybe there's like one other good song on that album, and it's during that '80s period, which like was not very good for him. Like the beginning of the '80s was great because you had an album called Infidels, and the end of the '80s was great because you had Oh Mercy. But the middle of the '80s, you had Shot of Love, and you had Empire Burlesque, which isn't that great either. And Shot of Love was kind of like the end of his religious portion. And Every Grain of Sand is off of it. And it's one of those songs where I actually came to it via a cover. I was watching rewatching a really bad M Night Shyamalan movie called Lady in the Water, which uses Dylan covers throughout the movie, and in the end credits, Every Grain of Sand is played by an artist named Amanda Ghost, and it is absolutely fantastic. So I decided to listen to the original version, and the original version of the song is kind of during that really nasally period of his life, but the lyric is just unbeatable. But I do highly recommend look up Every Grain of Sand by Amanda Ghost. It is absolutely fantastic. But the lyric, it is kind of a religious lyric. It's a lyric that, like last year, I remember one night, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just spend all night here. I'm just gonna try and figure out what this song is about. Go through the different lyrics because the lyrics were just so powerful. And basically, it's a Christian lyric. Every grain of sand. If you listen to, it's about like a broken man, a sinful man who wants to make a change. And he's like tempted by the sin of his old life. He's looking for answers, and the lyrics are just so good. You have, I gaze into the doorway of temptation's angry flame, and every time I pass that way, I always hear my name. Then onward in my journey, I come to understand that every hair is numbered like every grain of sand. It's like, you're worried about temptation, about sin, and then you remember that, like every grain of sand, which I think comes from Luke, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, that passage in the Bible that God is with you. God knows everything about you. He knows every hair on your head. Every hair is numbered, and He's with you on your journey during this difficult time. It's like not a it's a man who's not confident in his faith, but he's going through a difficult time and he's looking for answers, and it's just so good just to hear that. And I highly recommend checking out the Amanda Ghost version. Sheryl Crow actually sang this song at Johnny Cash's funeral.
Well, that was a very well delivered presentation there. I got so all right. So the way I did I will admit that I kind of played fast and loose when putting this list together with the like idea of favorite versus best. Some of the songs are in there just because they happen to be personal favorites of mine, and then I did include some that I just think are, from an objective point of view, just worthy of being up there. And so the back end of the list is more of sort of personal favorites of mine that I still think, I could make an argument that they belong where they are. So my number 10 is Maggie's Farm. And there's a special place in my heart for Maggie's Farm because it's one of the first songs that I learned how to play on the guitar. When I was first learning to play, I was like, I don't know, 14, 15. And when you first learn to play an instrument, it seems impossible to play anything of any sophistication whatsoever. And so you always kind of look for the real easy songs to play to sort of make yourself feel like you could at least play a song. So I wanted to learn one Beatles song and one Bob song when I first started. So for the Beatles, it was Paperback Writer because that's just basically one chord the whole time. And for Dylan, it was Maggie's Farm, because it's basically just one chord the whole time. There's a slight change at one point, but it's basically just a minor chord. Whatever key you want to sing it in, just play the minor chord and you can just sing it over. But I love Maggie's Farm. Maggie's Farm is just, like a simple sort of proletariat protest song, but there's something spunky and funny about it. Like, he just paints this great picture that's not too vivid because it's not a long song, but just of this family that he's stuck working for. Like Maggie's brother is one of my favorite characters in music. where he says, he hands you a nickel, he hands you a dime, he asks you with a grin if you're having a good time, and he finds you every time you slam the door. Like, just like you could just picture what a douche that guy is, and that he's, you know, and that he's the brother, right? And it's like the family farm, and they call it Maggie's Farm, but obviously it's a family business because her ma and her pa are there too. And then there's this like douche brother who's just like the enforcer, who just goes around and fucks with people and mocks them and sort of makes their life even harder. It's just a funny, spunky song. And actually, that is off of Bringing It All Back Home, which now that I look at it, well, actually, I made some last minute adjustments. So this list isn't quite as heavy on that album as it was, but that's an unbelievable album.
Yeah, that's a good album. It's a good song. It's not one of my favorites, but I generally think that Maggie's Farm was a response to the going electric thing. I'm not going to work on Maggie's Farm no more. I'm not going to be a part of that crowd anymore. I'm not going to do what you want me to do,
Right,
kind
right,
of
right,
thing.
right. Yeah, because that came out the same year. I mean, that almost foreshadowed Highway 61 because Bringing It All Back Home and Highway 61 came out in the same year. And Highway 61 was the full on rock album. They both came out in 1965. All right, number nine.
All right, so my number nine. Yeah, I think my list isn't so protesty as yours. I like those protest songs, but my list is probably like a mix between the apocalyptic imagery and the love song. And this is one of my favorites, "Boots of Spanish Leather," which is off of "The Times They Are a Changing." Joan Baez does a great cover of it, but it's actually about his relationship with Susie Rotolo. She had gone to Italy, and the song is kind of about like the correspondence that he is supposedly having with his lover, or kind of really her. And throughout the conversation of the song, it's you really get the sense that she ain't coming back. And she said, so the conversation kind of heats up, and the woman, who I guess is Susie in the song, kind of placates Dylan by offering to send him a token to remember her by, but he's not like interested in material goods. And my favorite lyric is, but if I had the stars of the darkest night and the diamonds from the deepest ocean, I forsake them all for your sweet kiss, for all that's I'm wishing to be owning, which is, it's great. That's such a great lyric. And then when it's found that she's not coming back, he says, there is something you can send me, which is Spanish boots of Spanish leather, which I assume means that he wants the boots so he could use to walk away from the relationship. I think that's what that means. But yeah, that's such a it's a great love song, great sad love song. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that was on my honorable mention. That almost made the list. That was very, very close to mine. Yeah, great tune. And if you noticed, same exact melody as Girl from the North Country,
Yes, yep, it is.
which is a great song also. But yeah, no, I love that one. That's a good pick. All right, so my number nine is a fun, bouncy tune that I wasn't gonna put on. I was gonna go with something more cerebral, which would have been "It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding." That tune is almost too advanced for me. Like, it makes me nervous to listen to that song. That's how good it is. Like, just just the way the verses are arranged and stuff. So I don't even really enjoy that one, just because I admit that one's over my head. But this one is a really fun little bouncy tune. It's off of, I believe, Blonde on Blonde. It's Most Likely You'll Go Your Way and I'll Go Mine.
Yeah, it's a good
Just a
one.
great little song. It's one of the songs with the most replay value of any of his, because a lot of the Dylan stuff is musically either difficult or some of it is sort of, musically a bit on the boring side sometimes if it's just like a lyrical showcase and stuff like that. But this one is just really fun to keep listening to over and over again. I love the way the chorus is structured. I just love the way he crams all those lyrics into those couple of different beats, when you go your way and I'll go mine. And then it just kind of rolls into the next verse and there's those horn parts. And actually, there's a really great remix of this song that Mark Ronson does. I don't know if you ever heard that. Um,
I think so.
but that was on the Dylan like anthology. He puts out all these greatest hits things from like time to time, and that was like a bonus track on it that I was able to download separately. But he really kind of goes wild with the horn idea. Like he puts all these like funky, cool little horn licks in there and a real driving sort of dance drum beat that just makes it a lot of fun. So that's one of the songs I could listen to over and over again. It has one of the highest replay values of any of his stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a good like poppy song, which is interesting because the rest of the album,
It's almost like
Blonde on
carnival
Blonde,
music.
yeah, the rest of the album, Blonde on Blonde, has more of that cerebral, introspective stuff. But there's that
Well,
song, and there's
so,
another song on that album
Well,
that
there's
is of
Rainy
the
Day
similar.
Women has that,
Yeah,
very,
yeah,
and even like another great one, which almost made the list is Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat. That's off that
yeah.
album too. Another
But
kind of fun, sort of bawdy, bluesy song. So that's kind of a mixed bag because then you have like Visions of Joanna on now, which came very close to making my list. Probably should have, but I went with some more personal preference to put this one on there.
that's a great pick. Number 8 for me is another kind of bouncy tune that's kind of about, well, it's Positively 4th Street, which was off. I didn't write down what album that's off
No,
of. I
that was
think
a
that was a
single. That
single.
was
That was a
yeah, yeah.
single. That's why.
Yep.
That's why. But Positively 4th Street is, I guess it's about which is another reference to what we were talking about when I brought up Maggie's Farm, is I guess another kind of direct lashing out at the folk music crowd when he went electric. Positively 4th Street might refer to 4th Street in Greenwich Village, which is where like Gertie's Folk City was. It's just kind of like the area where all that was going down in New York, where he got his start. And the what I like about it is that it's kind of like another kind of carefree melody, but like the lyrics are just so nasty. It's like it's I once heard someone call it a icy hipster bitch session.
Well, yeah, one of
That
my
one,
favorite lines in that is I wish you could stand inside my shoes so you know what
yeah,
a drag it is to see you. It's like
yeah, I
a
know.
very
That's
clever
yeah,
sort of play on that whole concept of walk a
yeah,
mile in my shoes. This way you know
yeah.
what a
No, that
bitch you
yeah,
are. Yeah.
right, exactly. That's my favorite lyric off that song too. It's
Oh,
just
sorry. Did
great.
I jump the gun on you?
Yeah, you did.
Oh,
Whatever.
sorry.
But no, it's like a song you could like dance to and rock out, but when you like listen to it, it's like, this guy, he's angry at somebody. It's like a friend that has really broken his heart, and I mean, it's great, but it has such a nice melody.
Dylan
I like,
created that whole
yeah,
thing. That's why I say, like, I mean, we'll talk more about this later. But yeah, he created that whole rock angst thing. That
yeah.
would not exist were it not for him. And we'll talk about that later, obviously. You know where I'm going with that. All right. So is that it for your number 8? Do you have anything else to say?
Johnny Rivers does a great cover of it, but no, it's great. I just love the combo. I just love the irony of the music. It's great, fantastic.
Yep. Excellent pick for sure. That was on my honorable mention list as well. All right, number 8. This is a complete opposite kind of song from Positively 4th Street. The only newer song to make this list. There were a lot of newer songs that came close, but the one that made it because it's just a beautiful song and it's not even clever. It's not tricky. There's nothing really to it. It's just a straightforward ballad, but it's so tender and so sincere and has such a beautiful quality to it, and that's Mississippi off of Love and Theft.
That's my next pick.
Oh, so that's your number 7.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, no, Mississippi is fantastic. It's just a straightforward. I mean, there's nothing even much to say about it because it's not tricky, it's not show offy, it's not clever. It's just a beautiful ballad about a man with regrets in his life, but hope in his heart, and hoping he could sort of salvage his later years. And it's one of the songs that he makes that old, raspy, beaten up voice work for him in that song. Like, there's a lot of the later stuff where you almost wish he could have recorded it 30 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
Cold Irons Bound, that's a great little rollicking sort of
Oh yeah.
blues rock tune with a kick-ass bass line and stuff. You almost wish he was like 30 when he recorded that. So he could do that with the Highway 61 sort of, angst, right? And sort of attitude. But this, he really makes that old voice work. And there are a few other older songs that he makes work for him as well, which I suspect some might be later on your list. But Mississippi is beautiful.
Yeah, no, I love that song. It was actually written for Sheryl Crow. She brought it out first,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then he brought it out on Love and Theft, which think it came out like a year later. But she actually had it out before him. And
Well, I
there's
think he
actually,
wrote it during the Time Out of Mind sessions and then shelved it and
yeah,
gave it to her and then put
right.
it out on his own.
Right, exactly. The Dixie Chicks actually do a great
Yeah, yeah.
version of it. It's a live version, actually. But yeah, no, it's a great kind of just, it's a great song about regret. I love that song. I love that lyric. What's it? You can always come back, but you can't come back all the way.
Yeah, yeah, great line.
When my ship's been split to splitters, I'm sinking fast. I'm drowning in the poison. Got no future, got no past. But my heart is not weary. It's light, it's free. I've got nothing but affection for all those who sailed with me. So stick with me, baby, anyhow. Things should start to get interesting right about now.
Yeah,
It's
great.
great. I
Yeah.
love that song.
Yeah, no, Mississippi is excellent. All right, so that was your number 7, right?
Yes.
All right, so we killed two birds with one stone there. All right, my
Oh.
number 7 is one of the ultimate protest songs. It's a timeless, sort of direct confrontational protest song, and that's Masters of War. Masters of War just has such conviction behind it. The lyrics are just so forceful. He has just such contempt for the subject of the song. You could sing it in the 60s, you could sing it in every decade, since then, and it never loses its meaning because there's nothing specific that ties it down to one specific, place and time, really. And he's been careful to avoid that through much of his life. He sings political songs, but never timely songs, not topical songs. I mean, some, like obviously, Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, Hurricane, right? Stuff like that. Those are about
Yeah.
specific people and things. But this is just one of those timeless protest songs that will never age. Um, One of my favorite lines, just very simple, he says, "Those being the masters of war who hide behind walls and who hide behind desks." That's such a powerful line because
Yeah.
it really shows the two kinds of evil
Hmm.
warmongering people that exist. There are some who hide behind walls who know that the peasants are going to revolt, and come after them if they could only get to him. But then there's the other kind who hides behind a desk, who's right there in plain sight. But because of his ability to propagandize the public, right, because of his ability to sweet talk, right, and make himself come off as more civilized than he is, he hides behind that desk. That desk is his shield. He doesn't need a wall because he's able to just control people uh, through other means. And so it's a great song. I'm not a big Pearl Jam fan, but
Oh, well, yeah, it's interesting. That's a good version. Yeah.
Eddie Vedder does a great version
Yeah.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I love Masters of War. You know, it's not a song I seek out to listen to just because of the imagery. And it's kind of a downer. But Masters of War is kind of a
Well,
good
what is it? I'll
example.
stand on your grave to make sure that you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that specifically the last lyric is the most damning if I remember correctly. But what's interesting is that like with Dylan is interesting because he's so talented. He was writing these masterpieces of songs when he was 21, 22 years old, but he's not the type of he's kind of he's not a political figure. And never really wanted to be because he writes all these great political songs like off of like times they are changing stuff like that, but it seems like he only would write them just because he liked writing them and thought that he would do a good job writing them. And that's the same with his Christian period, where he's like, "Well, that's kind of I'm not really a big Christian, but I think that that's interesting music. I think I can do that good. I think I can do that well." And so, Masters of War. I don't, it's a great written song, but I don't know if he really cares too much about like what he says in his songs. He probably says,
Oh,
"Well,
I think he does. I mean,
he looks at something and says, I can do that. I can do that better." But in terms of his political activism, which was I think nil,
no, no. Well,
he's
he went with Pete Seeger down to the deep south and played for a lot of the black workers down there.
yeah, but that's when he was first starting out,
No, I know, but those
and
are his roots. And I think when he took off, he became this sort of enigmatic, sort of like larger than life figure. and he sort of parlayed that into more of like a performance artist type thing than an activist. But no, I mean, I think his roots are, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, all these, Delta blues singers. I mean, I think he definitely cares. I think it's definitely coming from a sincere place. Just like I think his Christian days were coming from a sincere place as well. I don't think it was for effect. I think that there became that he had this mythical quality about him as his career went on, and that he always kind of preserved. But there's real stuff there. I mean, you can't write lyrics like that if you don't care.
Yeah, you could be right. You could be right. But Masters of War is a good example, like you said, because it's not really specific. It's a good example of what people love about him, his folk music sounds, where it's like that song could have been written 100 years ago, but it still applies today.
Yeah, absolutely. So that last verse is, I hope that you die and your death will come soon. I'll follow your casket in the pale afternoon. Great imagery. And I'll watch while you're lowered down to your deathbed, and I'll stand over your grave till I'm sure that you're dead.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I
great.
like that.
So my number six is off of "Oh Mercy." It's a song called "Most of the Time." And we touched on that album at the beginning of the episode because yeah, because that middle 80s Dylan period with a lot of people feel is straight up awful. I mean, the album that came out before Oh Mercy was Under the Red Sky. And on Under the Red Sky is a song called Wiggle Wiggle.
Yeah, that's
And
widely known to be his worst song. That was in 1990. Yeah, Red Sky. Yeah.
oh, did Under the Red Sky come out after Oh Mercy?
I think so. Well, was
Oh
Oh
man.
Mercy 89? Yeah, I think Up to the Red Sky was a year after.
Oh man, that's that man. He took it. So yeah, Wiggle Wiggle. There's a lyric on Wiggle Wiggle, which you think of Dylan as like the world's greatest songwriter, as a lyric, Wiggle Wiggle like a bowl of soup.
Yeah.
Like the world's greatest lyricist wrote that. Anyways, but yeah, okay. So maybe I'm wrong about the dates there, but still,
Well,
it
the
is
one I know there was Knocked Out Loaded. That was 86. That's a pretty
yeah.
terrible one too.
Except for Brownsville Girl
I
at
don't
the
even think that's that great. I mean,
I like Brownsville Girl. I
okay,
like it a lot.
it's fine. A big deal because he co-wrote that with Sam Shepard, but it's fine. It's nothing I would listen to. It's long. It's kind of boring. I mean, it's the best song on that album because most of it's
Yeah.
crap. But yeah, that's widely thought to be a major dud as well.
Oh yeah. But the Lanois produced albums are so good, and I didn't notice until I started, delving into music. But the producer of an album is like the director of the film. It's like the director of the album. Really, it's almost like their vision of the album, which the producer, I guess, has a much greater role to play in the production of an album than they do in the production of, say, a film. And the Daniel Lanois albums, which okay, so I guess he didn't do Love and Theft, but that and Time Out of Mind, they just give this such a ethereal sound, and it's so good. I love listening to those albums because of that. And so most of the time is one of those great ethereal songs. It's like it's almost like a circular song. It's a guy being tough about the he's a guy being tough about the loss of a woman, and he's putting on like a facade about how he's okay with the not being with this woman. But as the lyric circles back, that kind of facade deteriorates with like and it using different kind of versions of the phrase most of the time. So at the beginning of this, at the of the song, he would say most of the time to reinforce what he's feeling, but then at the end, when he says most of the time again, he uses it to show what a facade that is. So like most of the time, my head is on straight. Most of the time, I'm strong enough not to hate. I don't build up illusion till it makes me sick. I ain't afraid of confusion, no matter how thick. I can smile in the face of mankind. Don't even remember what her lips felt like on mine most of the time. So how that whole thing breaks apart when he says most of the time at the very end of that refrain. That's like that for the rest of the song. It's so good. It's so there's so much telling in that last in that last phrase. I love it.
Well, you definitely sold it well. Like I said, I mean, I think it's a good song. I think that's a good album. I think that song, like most on the album, sort of benefits from when it came out. That it was really the first thing worth listening to in a while. And so, yeah, no, it is a good song. And when you talk about, the producer's role in an album, that was especially true in Bob Dylan's case, since he records like 4 or 5 completely different versions of every song. I mean, you have this whole bootleg series that's coming out now where you see like um the bootleg volume 8, which is some of the later stuff. Like there's 2 other versions of Mississippi on there that are completely different. One is like this acoustic slide guitar sort of walking blues kind of version, and one is, I think, like more of a stripped down piano version, whereas the one that's on the album is sort of just, straightforward acoustic bass and drums ballad. So settling upon a style, a time signature, even something as basic as that, never
Well,
mind instrumentation and effects. Yeah, that makes a huge difference when you got an artist who will literally record 3 or 4 totally different versions of the same song.
Well, it's amazing how, like, with that first volume of the Bootleg Series, it's like, "Oh, great, a different version of this song." But then, like, the new ones that come out, they put, like, 10 versions of the same song. Who are
Oh
these
yeah, like
people
the
that
huge.
listen to every
Oh
single
yeah,
one
yeah,
of
yeah.
those and, like, "Oh, like, the chord progression just differs a little here. Oh, there's a horn there. There's not a horn in this one."
Or some
I
of it is
mean,
like, like
they
a
drive you
take that was
insane.
cut short, a take where he fucks up a minute into it, and they put that on there. Like you
Yeah,
would hear
like,
a
people
bad
really
rehearsal.
wanna hear that?
Yeah,
Like, give me,
it's
like, 2 versions, but not give
right.
me every take, every day's take. Like, these are every take we did that day. It's insane, it's
Well,
insane.
depending on the era too, the bootlegs become more interesting because like the early stuff was basically just guitar and vocal, right? So yeah, you'll have a different version of this song, but it's not radically different. Whereas like when you get into the later stuff, like one of my favorite tracks off of the bootleg is the live version of High Water off that later years, the Telltale Signs bootleg. Just an electric guitar, and that was a live recording where his voice is all fucked up. But man, that's just a badass version of that song. And that's another great song. I mean, it's amazing how you look through these songs and even a forgettable track, quote unquote, you know, like that just has amazing little flourishes in there. It would just be like anybody else's best song. Like High Water has this great lyric. It's we got Charles Darwin trapped out there on Highway 5. The judge said to the high sheriff, I want him dead or alive. Either one, I don't care. There's high water everywhere. I mean, what a fucking kick-ass line that is. I mean, if anybody else wrote that, that would be like their signature line. And
Yeah.
instead, we just kind of forget about it. Anyway, High Water is not on my list. What are we on? 6? Oh yeah, number 6. Just a beautiful song that I love that you made sure that I was going to include so that you wouldn't include, and that is Changing of the Guards. Changing of the Guards, first track off of Street Legal. Just a totally different sound for him, too. Musically, it's probably the song, if I could take to a desert island and only play one Dylan song over and over again, it would be that one, just because it has such a nice melody. The instrumentation is unlike what he had done prior to that. He has these saxophone interludes between every
Yeah.
verse with a sax solo at the end. He has these, female backing vocals doing a sort of call and response through the whole song. And it's just a very cryptic song. A lot of people don't even know what the hell that's about. Some people say it's about Jesus. Some people just say, it's this sort of like weird, sort of mythical story that he's telling. But the verse that's just so haunting, and I posted this on election night 2016 because this is what
Yeah.
happened. You could summarize that election in this verse, and I don't even have to read this. I have this in my memory. It's, gentlemen, he said, I don't need your organization. I've shined your shoes, I've moved your mountains and marked your cards, but Eden is burning, so either get ready for elimination or else your hearts must have the courage for the changing of the guards. Just, I mean, fantastic lyric writing combined with a beautiful melody and a really sort of rousing instrumental arrangement just makes it probably the most delicious Dylan song, a tasty song.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a big ripe piece of fruit, that song. It's like a watermelon, that song.
That's a good review.
This
Song of
song is so
watermelon.
good. It's like a big juicy watermelon.
So yeah, so I'll be quick about it, but I love that song too. Yeah, it's kind of like he's kind of like a Jesus, he's kind of like a Christ-like figure who almost like he's coming back, and he doesn't like what he sees, and so he has to bring on the apocalypse. But once again, it has the great kind of upbeat melody. And Street Legal, I think, is just probably his most underrated album. I don't think that album is very highly regarded. It actually was recorded incorrectly. So when that first came out, like it didn't sound that good, and they remixed it about 20 years ago. But I kind of like all the songs on that album. Kind of like they fade up and then they fade out, which is very weird. Usually, don't a lot of songs don't fade in.
That's interesting you
Usually,
mentioned that because I did
they
notice that about that song. I don't know the rest of that album very well, but
most of
it
them are
is
like
kind of
that.
bizarre. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that
But
makes
I
sense.
like
If it wasn't
yeah.
recorded right, you'd have to just cheat it with a fade.
Yeah,
That's a
but it's
rule of
like it just
editing applies
there was more,
universally.
but like New Pony's great, and Senor is great off of that
Yeah,
album,
yeah, yeah.
and oh man, there's another great song on there that I'm forgetting now. But no, that's a great song. It's a really rollicking. Uh, the previous album was Desire, which had like its own sound to it, and this is almost like an R&B sound, and that saxophone is just great. And when he played it in concert. He doesn't do it anymore, but he would play it faster
Hmm.
than it is, and I'll have to share with you. It's no recording, but there's a YouTube recording, kind of a shitty YouTube recording of it, where it's like a faster version, and like the saxophone part of it is kind of it's more robust, but it's great. It's that's a I love that song. And there's a lot of apocalypse in that album, and that because that album, the next album was Slow Train Coming, which was at the beginning of the religious period. So you could see almost the flourishes of it in that album too.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so my number five is once again actually two Lenoirs in a row. This is Not Dark Yet, off of Time Out of Mind. It's off of which was another Lenoir produce, which still has that ethereal, dreamlike quality. Um, I think we're going to be talking about it later, but I've always seen that song as kind of a sequel to Desolation Row, because it's still about man who sees what he doesn't like what he sees in life. It's kind of like an old man he's faced a hard battle, hasn't been easy, and now he's at the end of his life, and he's heading towards death, and all he has left is his memories, I guess. And it's a really powerful song, and I love it. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, Not Dark Yet is excellent. That I had a very strong feeling it would be on yours, which is why I didn't put it on mine. That could easily fit somewhere on the back end of mine, though. Yeah, absolutely fantastic song. And again, like Mississippi, it's one of the later songs where he makes that old raspy voice work for him. Like that's a
Yeah,
song he couldn't have recorded that in his prime. You have to be an
yeah.
old man to sing that song.
Kind of that old man at a bar quality, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And you could see because of the very wet guitar, this very saturated sound, you could feel the cigarette smoke in the air,
Yeah.
while he's singing it. And again, that goes to the Daniel Lanois stuff, just the way that track was put together. No, Not Dark Yet. Excellent. Certainly an honorable mention. That really probably would have been on the list had I not been so confident that it would be on yours. All right, my number five is a song that has never been played live. The first track off of Bringing It All Back Home, Subterranean Homesick Blues. Not too much to say about this other than that it's just so fucking awesome. Like, it's just so fun. It's just like this beat poet rap tune. It's like a hip hop kind of song over this just like rollicking guitar and drums. And the thing I like about this is it's basically a word of advice from like a ne'er do well kind of hipster guy. Like it's it's like it's guidance to a young man. Don't follow leaders and watch your parking meters. That's such a great little like juxtaposition. Like don't follow leaders and watch your parking meters. Like yeah, rebel, but make sure you pay the meter so you don't get a ticket. you know like it's again it's that same thing with Maggie's Farm. A lot of that Bringing It All Back Home album just had these like spunky, ironic, almost like funny songs with this like rock attitude right before he went full rock.
Yeah, I always saw that song as almost like a precursor to rap. It's almost like he's rapping that song. It's because of like the momentum of the lyric and the phrasing
And the
and
mixed rhyme patterns, like there's not
yeah,
the same rhyme pattern every time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, and that of course, obviously that music video
Oh yeah,
was
iconic. Yeah.
is iconic. But yeah, no,
I mean,
that's a
Mama's in
I
the
love.
basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. I mean, just great stuff. Just so fun.
I know, yeah, it's a
And
great
so
song. I love it.
imaginative, but so grounded, at the same time. Like it's not in outer space. It's not indecipherable, but it's also complex, and not straightforward either. Yeah, great tune. Michael Fronte does a very good version of that too.
I don't know him.
He's from Spearhead. I'm trying to think of what a famous song of his is. It's like a reggae kind of artist. I can't think of any like major hits at the moment, but you should look that up. That's a good version of that he does.
Cool. So my number four is a song that I'm not going to speak on it a lot. I don't know if it's on your list because it's a song I don't understand. It's one of those songs that we used to work with a guy named Mike P, and we would talk about music with Mike P, and
Well, he was our
Mike P.
manager at Barnes and Noble. He managed the
Yeah,
music department where I
right.
worked. You worked in the book department.
Yeah, that's right. And but we would talk to him about music, and he just kind of would say with like, a lot of my feelings all the time, where he would talk about a song. He was like, I don't know what it means. I just like the way it sounds. And that's the way I feel with like a lot of Dylan music, where it really. I don't know if you're supposed to listen to this and try to decipher everything, but it just sounds great. And the Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, which is off of Blonde on Blonde, actually went back when there were records. It took up all of one side because it's an 11-minute song. But like Visions of Joanna, it's almost like a stream of consciousness. Like I said, I don't even get the lyric, but it's such a hypnotic melody. The instrumentation, the phrasing, and I just love it. It just goes on, and like I always listen to it, and like I don't want to end, and I think, man, this song can't get any better. And I check, it's like it's only on minute 5. You still got 6 more minutes left of this song. But yeah, it's once again like a dream-like song. It's I guess about his wife Sarah Lowndes, uh, Lowndes as in lowlands, and like I said, some of the lyrics I don't know what he's talking about. Some of the lyrics I love, like with your silhouette when the sunlight dims into your eyes where the moonlight swims. That's a nice rhyme. That's a sweet rhyme right there. But yeah, Sad Eye Lady of the Lowlands. I don't know what it's about, but I just love listening to it. It's a song you really get lost in. It's like I said, it's hypnotic.
Yeah, it's quite good. It's a song I have not listened to that many times though, just because its runtime is a little intimidating, and so it's not the kind of thing you put on over and over again. But it's very good. I don't really have anything to say about it either, though, just because I haven't listened to. I probably listened to that song 3 or 4 times in my life. All right, so now we're getting into the real cream of the crop. So my number four, just another beautiful song. Oh, just a magical song. This song is like a Shakespearean comedy. This is like a Midsummer Night's Dream or a Twelfth Night. This song, another one off bringing it all back home, Mr. Tambourine Man.
Oh yeah.
It's just such a pretty melody. It's magical when that song comes. I've in preparation for doing this episode over the last few days when I've been cooking. I have a little iHome, and I put my iPod in there, and I've just been playing back some of these albums. And when that song came on, I just found myself singing along to it. And the thing is, I can't even recite the lyrics for you now, but it's the kind of song that once it gets going, the lyrics just come to you and you just go with it. And I just found myself singing along to it while I'm, chopping my zucchini there. And when when it ended, I'm just like, I gotta listen to that again. Like I can listen to that song forever. Maybe I could take that instead of changing the guards to my desert island if I had to. It's just so beautiful. And people assume that it was inspired by like some drug trip just because the lyrics are so wild. He insists it's about a guy named Bruce Langhorne who accompanied him on guitar, who he said had a big tambourine that he used to bring around with him. But it's just an example of like whatever he says the song is about doesn't matter. These songs just like transcend that, and that's just a perfect example of that. Just the line alone, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, silhouetted by the sea. Just that. And that's
Yeah.
part of and but I love how he keeps milking the same rhyme and just keeps hitting the rhyme over and over again to make these very short verses that just weave into each other. Like I said, it's a song that you just feel you have to listen to again once you listen to it the first time. I wasn't ready to just skip over it. I'm like, damn, I got to play that again. It's so good.
No, it's a great song. It's one of those great imagery songs, and it's one of those songs that, like, Dylan in my early 20s was kind of my gateway into music, where you really start kind of expanding your horizons and really getting into music and thinking about music in a different way. And that's one of the songs that does it.
Yeah, for sure.
So my number three is a song called "Tomorrow Is a Long Time," which I guess was recorded for like a concert album in like '63, but the album I guess wasn't very good. So they just held it out and didn't bring it out until Greatest Hits Volume 2 in 1973. It's a live song, and it's a simple song. It's a simple melody. It's about once again, it's about Susie Rotolo going off to Italy, same as Boots of Spanish Leather. They were recorded originally around the same time, and it's just amazing. This heartbreaking song once again was written by a 21-year-old. And it just, it speaks to anyone who's ever been lonely and sad about the absence of a lover. And the lyrics are, like I said, they're simple lyrics. Um Not too much for deciphering in this one. They're just simple. They're just beautiful. There's beauty in that silver singing river. There's beauty in the sunrise in the sky. But none of these and nothing else can touch the beauty that I remember in my true love's eyes. And that's such a great longing lyric. And it's very sad. It's very sad. I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that is a good one. You reminded me of that because tried to warn each other of any deep cuts that we may have, just so we weren't taken off guard. And I had not listened to that one that many times, although I did know it. Um, what's interesting about that is, yeah, it was released as a single in the '70s after he went full rock, and yet that is as stripped down a folk ballad as you can possibly get. I mean, it's a quiet, tiny little song. The first like 10 seconds of the recording you have to like check to make sure that your thing is working because you can't, you can't hear it at all. I mean, it's a tiny little quiet folk tune.
It's great.
All right, so my number three. So these top three I ordered the way I did, kind of arbitrarily. I mean, this belongs at number three, but this is on here not because of how brilliant it is or how sophisticated it is. This is on here because this is a song that people will be singing in 200 years. It's one of those songs that will be a traditional folk song. Like you know how we have some songs that we don't really know where they came from and who wrote them. They just kind of emerged and were carried on through people singing them and re-singing them. And of course, now with technology, we'll know who wrote it. But this could be one of those songs, and that's "Blowing in the Wind." Um,
Yeah.
there's really not much else to say about that. Everybody knows that song. That's a protest song of a kind, but it's a song that will be relevant for as long as human beings are on the earth. And if we are still on the earth in a couple hundred years, which is questionable at this point, quite frankly, that'll be a song that people will still sing. And even if the records were eliminated and no one knew who wrote it, that would still be there. It would be like one of those old traditional folk songs that just kind of is passed on. And it's just an iconic song in that way. And so it had to be on here.
Oh yeah, no, I love that song. It's a very moving song. He wrote it on Minetta Lane in Greenwich Village, sitting on the pavement there or the curb. But yeah, no, I love that song. Yeah, no, that's one of the songs that probably is in that canon of being a song that it was written like 100 years or so ago. Could have been written, but it speaks to every time and every generation. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, he has said at times that like he didn't feel like he was writing the lyrics. Like "It's all right, Ma, I'm only bleeding" is one of the things. And like I said, I'm not equipped to even talk about that song. But what is it? Uh, Silver spoon eclipses both the sun and moon. You know, just like he says that kind of shit just came to me. He says I don't feel like I even wrote that. I was just channeling something else. And this is the same thing, right? I mean, it's an old soul, an eternal soul wrote that song, no doubt.
Yeah, no, it's great. So for my number two, so my number two and number one, I'll try to keep my talking about these to a minimum. But they are the most important songs on the list, and they're both from the same album. So both my number two and my number one are from an album called Blood on the Tracks, which is my favorite album of his, my favorite album in general. And number two is a song called Idiot Wind. And Blood on the Tracks, just to give you just like a little backstory, just real quick. Blood on the Tracks was originally recorded in New York as kind of a stripped down um, album with just like a guitar and I think an organ, and there wasn't much on the album besides that. And Dylan wasn't happy with it. He showed it to his brother. He let his brother listen to it, David Zimmerman, and his brother said it sucked. And so he decided to re-record the entire thing in Minnesota with a full band. And they released the album, but the musicians on the Minnesota version never got credit. If you look at the credits of the album, it's all credited to the New York one, the New York musicians. But when the album was released, it was like 8 out of the 10 songs were from the Minnesota sessions, but there's still like a couple songs like uh, "Shelter from the Storm" and "You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go" are off of the original the New York version, but the rest was all redone in Minnesota.
Just
And
real quick while
it,
we're on that, did you ever hear the Miley Cyrus cover of "You're Gonna Make
oh,
Me
it's good.
Lonesome"?
I
It's
love that
good, yeah,
song.
it's
It's
really
good.
good, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. The only thing she's done good. Actually, I like the climb.
Okay,
I
all right,
don't
we don't have to
start getting
Yeah,
into
right,
Miley
exactly.
Cyrus.
Let's just
They
get a
go
little
off on a
focused.
weird
I knew I
Miley
shouldn't have
Cyrus
done that.
tangent.
I knew I should not have chimed in, but I just was curious.
Sorry. My first day on the job. Anyway, so yeah, no, what's interesting about when you talk about different versions of songs is that the New York version and the Minnesota version are both very different and both two different types of emotion. So Idiot Wind is about his divorce from the aforementioned Sarah Lowndes. And there's so many different versions of this song. If you listen to the versions from the New York cut or the Minnesota cut, and the famous one, the one that came out on the Minnesota cut, is a really like fast, big band song. It's rollicking. It's angry. It's really powerful. It's like great musical venting. It's almost cathartic in the way, or it's almost like a rap diss track, I guess you could say. And then the original New York version is it's basically it's almost the same lyric, but it's two different things. There's more heartbreak in this kind of stripped down, slower version. So you have like the more heartbreaking, slower, stripped down version, and then you have the angrier band version that everybody comes to love. But it's great. I mean, the lyrics that we listen to this are so good. My favorite probably is I noticed that the ceremony, your corrupt ways had finally made you blind. I can't remember your face anymore. Your mouth has changed. Your eyes don't look into mine. The priest wore black on the seventh day and sat stone face while the building burns. I waited for you on the running board near the cypress tree while the springtime turned slowly into autumn. Idiot wind blowing like a circle around my skull from the Grand Coulee Dam to the Capitol. This is during the time of Nixon. Idiot wind blowing every time you move your teeth. You're an idiot, babe. It's a wonder that you still know how to breathe. I mean, it's great. It's like I said, it's a great musical venting song. It's cathartic, and depending on which version you listen to, you gather different things. There's more anger in that version, or there's more like heartbreak and sadness in that New York version. And the New York version has like this great organ, this really foreboding organ that's used into it. Oh, it's fantastic. I recommend looking up all the versions of Idiot Win because they're all absolutely brilliant in different ways.
Yeah, that's good. It's a great song. I knew it would be on your list, which is one of the reasons I didn't feel I needed to put it on mine, but that's right there for sure. And yeah, no, it is great. And you're right about the different versions. There's a great version on that bootleg, the More Blood, More Tracks bootleg is excellent. I've only listened to 10 songs off of it because I have the sampler because I download the music off Apple Music, since it's free and I would have to buy the whole thing separately. Eventually they'll release the whole thing, so I'll listen to all of it, but there's a great version of it on there. The album version is good. And yeah, obviously just fantastic writing as you demonstrated. So my number two is in fact Desolation Row, and it's funny because your one and two are off of one album, and my one and two are off of this off of the same album as well. Desolation Row, the final track off Highway 61 Revisited. Desolation Row is just as brilliant a song as you can write. I think. I mean, that's like the pin. Like there's certain songs where you're like, songwriting can't get better than this. It can get as good, but it can't get better. Like I think Springsteen's Thunder Road is in that category. It's like songwriting just doesn't get better than that. And songwriting just doesn't get better than this. I love how it blends biblical figures with real life historical figures, with like fairy tale figures. It's like the Sergeant Pepper's album cover, and sort of doing like vignettes and little stories about the different characters in this sort of dystopian, apocalyptic, sort of half dream, half nightmare kind of a world. It's such an evocative song. Um, One of my favorite verses is the second verse where Cinderella, you almost get the sense of like she's in a bar or whatever, and Romeo comes in, and Romeo is sort of aggrieved and he starts hitting on her, and the implication is that he gets his ass kicked by the guy who says, "You're in the wrong place, my friend, you better leave." And the only sound that's left after the ambulances go is Cinderella sweeping up on Desolation Row. Just fantastic. And then one of the really haunting and ironic and brilliant phrases in there is, praise be to Nero's Neptune, the Titanic sails at dawn, everybody shouting, which side are you on? Just the idea of like the passengers on the Titanic shouting, which side are you on? That's
Yeah.
just haunting, ironic imagery. It's just a brilliant song. It's 11 minutes. Every verse is its own story. It's just a collage. Like you could make an anthology of short films based
Oh
on that
yeah,
song. I mean,
I like
it's
it.
as good as it gets.
Oh, what's that lyric? I rearranged their faces and given them different names.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a great. I love the chord progression too. In that
It's like this
song.
Spanish guitar.
Yeah.
Somebody once described that song as like "Home on the Range" for 1960s America.
Yeah, well, I know that he said that. I think someone asked him one time, like, "What would you do if you were elected president?" Which is, it's just one of those stupid questions to ask Dylan. But he said that he would replace "America the Beautiful" with "Desolation Row," and
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
but one of the things about that song is I remember when like you would pick me up to do something, and I would get in your car, and of the
Go to the
music that
pizzeria.
you were yeah, go to pizzeria, always because you always have music on playing off a CD or your iPad. But I noticed that Desolation Row was the song that I would most hear when I would get in the car with you when you would pick me up, and I just would think that this guy is just driving around town listening to this apocalyptic song about this guy who just sees all this shit going on, and it's a great song. It's a great song.
Oh yeah, there was a time when I would listen to it over and over again. Yeah, because there's so much there. Now I don't listen to it so much anymore because I've heard it a bunch of times and it's long. But it's one of those that just is an absolute standout. It's an absolute masterpiece. Like I said, songwriting just doesn't get better, in my opinion. All right, number one. I know what your number one is now, which is
So
why
yeah,
I'm glad I didn't include it.
so my number one is off that same album, Blood on the Tracks. It's called Tangled Up in Blue. And it's interesting. Like I said, I highly recommend you seek out all the versions of these two songs because generally people think that the more stripped down original version of Idiot Wind is better than the album version. But then uh, when it comes to Tangled Up in Blue, generally it's felt that the Minnesota version, the one that's on the album, is better than the original. But once again, it's two different versions of the same song. There, it's a guy who's going after a long lost lover who they like tend to cross paths at some time. Um, and he's just trying to get back to this long lost girl. And there's a lot of heartbreak in it, a lot of things like not working out. But it's set to this really kind of upbeat tempo in the album version. But then, once again, if you listen to that original version, it's about the same thing, but it's more stripped down. It's sadder. It's more heartbreaking than the version that we come to know. Having said that, that song is probably my favorite song ever, and it's the one that I've listened to probably the most in my life. It's one of those songs that you listen to, you're like, oh man, you think that he wrote it, just for you. It's just this perfect confluence of melody, of instrumentation, of storytelling, and of course, when it comes to Dylan, it's always about phrasing. I mean, it's like if you listen to it, it's like it's always about it's. There's a great progression there. There's a lot of momentum. The melody, like while he's singing, it's building, it's growing momentum, and then suddenly it ends abruptly, and he delivers the title of the song, "Tangle Up in Blue."
Yeah, it's a
It's
great way to put it. I was thinking of a way to communicate that, but you're so right. And it's like, and it's like that with like Shelter from the Storm or anything. There's a line. They don't really have choruses as they
right,
have lines that
yeah,
the verses all land on.
hmm
And the way they do that in this is so smart. Or not they, he's the one who
right,
wrote
yeah.
it.
But yeah, it's great. It's like the best lead out of a song I've ever heard with a harmonica solo, and some of his harmonica stuff is like hit and miss, but that harmonica solo at the end, that lead out of that song is so great. It's like it's positive. It's like dancing despite all the heartaches and the near misses that the song talks about. It's funny because when they were, and this is, I'll make this quick, but when they recorded it, one of my favorite stories is that once again they recorded it originally in New York. They decided to re-record it in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and with a whole new group of local musicians that Dylan's brother had gotten, and they were like big Dylan fans. And Dylan, for him being like a genius, is just not the best like communicator. I guess he's kind of a weird guy, and he's trying to communicate to these like musicians what he wants, and the musicians were like, none of this makes any sense. They didn't understand what he wanted. Dylan would get frustrated when they didn't understand him, and he would like, okay, I'll do it, and the musician would be like, would say to themselves, okay, I'll do it. He's a genius. He's the genius. I'll just do what he says. It's just funny. My favorite lyric is probably the end. He says, but me, I'm still on the road, heading for another joint. We always did feel the same. We just saw it from a different point of view. Tangled up in blue." It's
Yeah,
great.
that was the line I was just going to reference as an example of just that really clever phrasing because he rhymes joint with points, and you think that's the end of the phrase, but then he adds a view to rhyme with blue.
Yeah.
It's, like this really clever rhythmic switcheroo.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's what It's just with him. It's all about the phrasing, and that kind of a lot of people's with his voice. His voice is not for everybody, but you just can't get over the phrasing of his songs and how that weaves into the storytelling, and it's great. It's my favorite song ever.
Yeah, I love Tangled Up in Blue. Same thing, just really melodic, great guitar part. I just love the strumming pattern with the hammer on, just the way it opens. Just great. Once again, another juicy piece of fruit. That's like a pineapple, let's say. Like a sweet pineapple. All right, well, my number one, I have to say I'm shocked is not on your list at all. because it seems like an obvious one. But my number one is the opening track off Highway 61, and that's Like a Rolling Stone. It just has to be number one. You know, I was thinking you could make a lot of these number one for me. I mean, any of those top four songs really could be his best. The thing that makes Like a Rolling Stone, though, such a no brainer for me is that, as I hope people have gleaned from listening to this, I'm a bit of a music a buff. We don't talk music much on this show because it's not the theme, but I love music. And I have an old iPod Classic, the real old school thing, the whatever 160 gigabyte hard drive that you plug the analog headphones in, no Bluetooth, no cell phone, no nothing. I keep the music on the iPod. I have 25,761 songs on my iPod. Of those, I can say with confidence 20,000 would not have been written had Like a Rolling Stone not been written. That's how influential that song is. That whole album was the birth of what we call rock music right now. There's nothing that matches the influence of that Highway 61 album, particularly Like a Rolling Stone, because that has some quieter stuff on there. Desolation Row, obviously a quieter tune, just like Tom Thumb's Blues, all that kind of stuff. But Like a Rolling Stone gives the volume, the drive, and the angst and grievance that really defines rock music. But generally speaking, people will say that like the three most influential pop musicians of the 20th century would be Chuck Berry, the Beatles, and of course the subject of our show, right? And Chuck Berry, yes, from a sonic perspective, yeah, there's no guitar rock without him, right? Beatles, Sergeant Pepper, obviously that stuff, you just obviously had a major impact. But there's an intangible quality to that song where it's the anger and the grievance and the hurt combined with the electric guitar, the wet overdrive guitar and the booming drums. And when he played it, at the Royal Albert Hall concert, when people started booing him, he said, "Turn it up, play it fucking loud." That's the birth of rock and roll. There is no rock and roll without that song. And so every rock artist owes something to that song. Even if you want to say like Led Zeppelin, they came from the UK, obviously, they were more influenced by a lot of the blues singers, so they would have existed, but the blues is not the same. The blues is more spiritual. It's based on actual, hard times and actual heartache and people with real problems. Whereas like this guy doesn't have a real problem. This guy's pissed off at this woman and he's letting her have it and just, taking joy in her demise. He's just loving watching this woman who's wronged him get what's coming to her and doing it with guitars and drums and screaming and singing the lyrics in this, this very bombastic way. That's rock and roll. There is no rock and roll without that song. And so it just has to be my number one.
Yeah, I didn't put it on just because it's so famous, and obviously it's great. A lot of people think that's the greatest song of all time. I know Bruce Springsteen always talks about that from that opening snare drum at the beginning. It's like his life changed, and for a lot of people, yeah, Like a Rolling Stone is one of the it's the first Dylan song that I heard. It is a transformative song for people because it sounds like this rock song, but the lyrics at that time were really, really different from what rock was at that time. Maybe rock was about getting the girl,
Right,
which is what they
exactly.
all
Right.
are. And
Exactly. And
you
all
apply,
of the,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead. I won't cut you
you
off.
apply that sound to lyrics about introspective, and that changes, people, and people hear that they like what happened to me, where you get more interested in this more introspective music that is more than what is surface level. And that's obviously what happened to the Beatles as well, because from then on their music changed as well. They got more introspective. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's right. You really can't get better than that song.
Yeah, and that came out in 1965. I'm
I
pretty
think it's
sure
about Edie
Sergeant
Sedgwick.
Pepper's.
Edie Sedgwick. This is what this song's about.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I don't know like the real life stories behind a lot of these songs. It's not really like something I care that much about. Like I said, he has stories about, oh yeah, Mr. Tambourine Man is about this guy who used to play guitar with me who carried around a big tambourine. Who cares, right? It's like it's about what it means to you. Um, but yeah, that came out in '65, and then '66 is when I think The Beatles had Revolver and Rubber Soul out in '66, I believe, and then I think they had Help out in '65. I think I'm getting the years right on that. But like that was a time when music was changing so quickly, and you realize how long ago that was now. That was 55 years ago that song came out.
Mhm.
And so it's just incredible the impact of it. And that whole album, I mean, you could say Highway 61, the song itself is in that same vein, but again, the intangible quality that makes rock and roll is not just the sound, but it's the attitude and the angst that just was born with that song. I can't think of a song that predates it that I could say influenced it in any way. Right? I mean, it just that like that started a whole genre of music.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I love that. Used to be so amused at Napoleon Rags and the language that he used. Go to him now. He calls you. You can't refuse. When you ain't got nothing, you got nothing to lose. You're invisible now. You got no secrets to conceal. Oh, it's so much. And there's, yeah.
All right, well, I think that wraps us here.
So
So,
I've heard stuff from like the new album, which I haven't been like too impressed with like the new album just yet. They did release a song called "False Prophet," which I do like the opening lyric of that song. Any day that don't end. Sorry, another day that don't end. Another ship going out. Another day of anger, bitterness, and doubt. I know how it happened. I saw it begin. I opened my heart to the world, and the world came in.
that's a good lyric.
Yeah.
I don't remember it. It's hard to understand. Because now the voice is
You know, it's
really good.
funny, and I'll say this really quick, but I remember when I first got into Dylan, and it was around the time that a James Taylor Christmas album came out, and I was like, oh, that's one album that you'll never hear Dylan come out. And sure enough, a couple years later, he brought out a Christmas album, and that's a very interesting album. I highly recommend you listen to Christmas in the Heart because that has some of the most awkward phrasing and just not very merry album for a Christmas album that you're ever going to hear. So that's probably what I would say might be the worst Dylan album.
Well, he also put out like 5 albums worth of old like Sinatra
Yeah.
standards because he put out two, and then he put out a triple album called Triplicate, which is 30 songs. So he's got like 50 old standards that were
Yeah, his last
re-recorded.
his last all new album was 2012. His album called Tempest, which I think is a great album. And people were like, I remember critics were like, "Is this going to be your last album?" Because Shakespeare's last play was The Tempest, and this is called Tempest. And Dylan said, "No," he says, "that was The Tempest. This is just Tempest."
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
his
Well, he
reasoning.
put out another one. Yeah, that one was pretty good. That one was not quite on par with the three that came before it. Like Modern Times, Love and Theft, Time Out of Mind. Those are three really great ones in a row. Especially the first half of Modern Times is just fantastic. The first 6 tracks on it are just so good. Then it kind of falls off a little bit. But anyway, that was a fun show. That was a long one, but a good one. I hope you guys all enjoyed that. Once again, check out the new podcast, the sort of spin-off podcast from Do Dissidents called The Dissident Film Club. If you want to hear Justin and I talk about movies with our friend Russell Dobular, of course. Dobular. I mispronounced his name after all this time. Anyway, must be getting tired. Thank you guys all for listening. You can follow us on Facebook, like us on SoundCloud, subscribe to this podcast on any podcast player. Go to patreon.com/do dissidents and contribute to the show for as little as $0.10 a day and get bonus exclusive content through the Patreon feed. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your support. Thanks to Justin, and we'll see you next time.